I'd like to begin this meeting of Bethlehem City Council for Wednesday, May 18th. Will everyone please stand for the invocation be given by Pastor Marge Hassler of Westside Moravian Church, and please remain standing for the pledge to the flag.
Please let's be in an attitude of prayer. Holy God, thank you for your presence in our world and the blessings that you bring to us every day. Thank you for life in the city of Bethlehem, where we are free to worship your many different forms. Thank you for the freedom to come to you in prayer. Thank you for loving us just the way we are. Creator God, you have given the people the opportunity to elect leaders to govern. Help us to support and affirm those we have elected. Bless our mayor, all the city officials, and in particular, this assembled council. I ask you to give them the ability to listen to the voices of the people, to get a sense of the needs of the city, to have an interest in justice and the willingness to govern fairly, and the desire to work together even when they disagree. And Lord, give them a dedication and faithfulness to service. Tonight, as these men and women conduct the business of this city, help them to learn from the past, to see what is happening today, and to vision what we can become tomorrow. Help them to be just and fair, and to seek the things that will benefit all who live and work here in Bethlehem. And may they accomplish what is good and pleasing in your sight. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
On that note, please call a roll.
Mrs. Belinsky. Present. Mr. DiGiacinto.
Present.
Ms. Dolan. Present. Mr. Evans.
Present.
Mr. Mallon. Present. Mr. Reynolds.
Present.
Mr. Dunchess.
Present. We'll move to item 4, approval of the minutes for May 3rd. Any comments? Minutes stand approved. We'll move to courtesy of the floor for public comment with a 5-minute time limit on an ordinance or resolution to be voted on this evening by City Council. We have quite a few people that have indicated they would like to speak. Let me just kind of go over the process briefly before we turn to courtesy of the floor. Many of you were probably here a few weeks ago. We had 28 people speak, I believe, before council at that committee meeting. And tonight, we're dealing with the Human Relations Commission proposed ordinance. This is the first reading. And for an ordinance to become law, it has to go through City Council twice. So tonight would be the first vote, technically, and the second vote would be June 7th, at our next meeting on June 7th. I want to really thank Cindy and Nan and Judy in our office for putting together all of the amendments in a orderly and hopefully constructive and an easy way to follow that we'll be working through. And I believe she made 100 copies for the audience. So you should, hopefully everyone has a copy of all the proposed ordinances. We did print 100, correct? Okay, thank you. And what we're going to do when we get to that part, so it may sound laborious, but for an amendment to be discussed on the floor, we'll have a motion, and there'll be a second, if there's a second, and then we'll vote on the motion, and then we'll have discussion on the amendment. And then when that concludes, we'll vote on that amendment. And we right now have 18 amendments that have been proposed by members of council and our solicitor, Mr. Spadoni. Now, it's possible, too, that we may have some additional amendments, maybe at the June 7th meeting, and some additional changes. So tonight really is the first step was the committee process. Tonight is the second step, where it's before the full council for a vote. And as I said, we have 17 or 18 amendments. And then the final vote would be June 7th, where there's a possibility there could be additional amendments. So what we passed tonight may not be in concrete. It may be, it may not be. But everyone will have the opportunity to speak for 5 minutes, and I would ask everyone, no applause. We respect everyone's right to speak here, and City Council always will listen to the public, and then we will, when courtesy to the floor concludes, then we will go into our official business. I'll ask our solicitor, Mrs. Bedoni, if you would like to make any comments. You've been very involved in this process.
I think that's a template to follow.
Thank you. Mr. Shanker? And your name and address for the record.
Adrian Shanker, 1020 West 2nd Street in Allentown, Pennsylvania. And I'm here tonight because, as you know, you have a very important issue in front of you tonight. You're considering making Bethlehem the latest city to end discrimination against all people. I reiterate all people because this ordinance has specific protections for people of faith and specific protections for people of color and people with all abilities and people of all genders and sexual orientations. And all of those protected classes are what this ordinance is about. What this ordinance is also about is about making Bethlehem a welcoming place to be for everyone, which is why since the last meeting, a number of additional organizations in your city have come forward and said that we support this ordinance. Organizations such as Lehigh University, who have a letter from their president, which I'll distribute when I'm done speaking. And
we'll make that part of the record.
And organizations like the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce of the Lehigh Valley, and the Bethlehem YWCA, and the Jewish Federation of the Lehigh Valley, all since the committee meeting, have come forward and said, not only do we want you to pass this, but we want to submit something to you, and we want to tell you why we want you to pass this. I also have a letter that I'll submit to you from Pastor Don Garrett from the Unitarian Universalist Church, who unfortunately is speaking in Allentown tonight. But I want to read you a piece from his letter where he says, speaking to one of your amendments that you have in front of you regarding the religious exemption, there's currently a religious exemption to the law with a loophole so wide a truck could drive through it. The intent of the clause, which is 100% necessary and an important piece of any law of this nature, is to protect faith institutions from government interference in their deeply held religious values. Examples include a Catholic priest where it would be possible for the church to say that they only can hire heterosexual unmarried men, thereby creating an exemption based on gender, marital status, and sexual orientation. The exemption would be based on long-standing, mission-driven Catholic teachings, and those exemptions are fine. What is not fine would be the faith institution arbitrarily exempting unrelated positions from civil rights protections, like a manager, for example, at the Moravian bookstore seeking an exemption based on age. There is nothing in Moravian teaching that suggests it is necessary to restrict employment of booksellers based on their age. Therefore, the position should not be exempt from the law. And that's what we're trying to convey to you with the amendment regarding the religious exemption. And I also want to strongly urge you to amend out the sunset provision and to fix the timeline of when complaints can be filed. And I know that all of these amendments, we've spoken about them and you have plenty of information about them. But just to close, I just want to reiterate that there is no rational reason for anyone to oppose this legislation. There's no rational reason because it does nothing to hurt business. It does nothing to hurt people of faith. And this is about inclusion for everyone. And not just protecting one marginalized community, but supporting all people that live, work, visit, and enjoy your wonderful city. So I look forward to watching you vote in favor of this tonight, hopefully unanimously, and watching you vote again in favor of this on June 7th. Thank you very much, and I'll submit both of these into the record.
Thank you. And we'll provide copies to all the members. Thank you. Mr. Hoover, Andy Hoover.
Good evening, members of City Council. My name is Andy Hoover, address 105 North Front Street, Harrisburg. It's a pleasure to be here with you this evening. I'm the Legislative Director for the American Civil Liberties Union of Pennsylvania. And I'm here tonight on behalf of the 17,000 members of the ACLU of Pennsylvania, including 159 members here in Bethlehem. Founded in 1920, the ACLU is one of the nation's oldest civil rights organizations, and ACLU activity in Pennsylvania dates to the 1930s. Last month, I submitted a letter to the council explaining the advantages and need for local non-discrimination ordinances. I will not repeat in detail what was stated in that letter, but would like to reiterate several points. Local non-discrimination ordinances are beneficial for several reasons. A local law ensures timely responses to discrimination claims, relieves the burden on the Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission, and provides a local perspective in resolving disputes. In addition, local ordinances can and do provide protections that do not currently exist in state law, including sexual orientation, gender identity or expression, marital status, and familial status. As you know, an extremely broad religious exemption has been written into the non-discrimination ordinance bill. No other organization has the depth of experience in both protecting religious freedom and ensuring civil rights that the ACLU has. Numerous organizations work for religious freedom, and many organizations work for civil rights for a variety of marginalized communities. But few, if any, organizations advocate for both, as the ACLU does. It is my belief that we are uniquely positioned to comment on the balance of these two values, religious freedom and civil rights. In balancing non-discrimination protections and religious expression, the First Amendment rights of religious institutions must be respected. These institutions should be exempt from non-discrimination laws when hiring physicians that teach the faith. For example, if the Catholic Church believes that only men should be priests, the Church has a First Amendment right of religious expression that protects that belief. However, religious institutions should not be exempt from non-discrimination laws when hiring positions that do not teach the faith. Examples include information technology staff, office workers, and custodians. Employees who do not teach the faith have a right to be free from discrimination and do not have a direct connection to the institution carrying out its religious mission. This position is reinforced by case law. Numerous federal courts, including the Third Circuit Court of Appeals, which covers Pennsylvania, have ruled on a ministerial exception to civil rights laws. This exception allows religious institutions to ignore non-discrimination laws when hiring for positions that relate to teaching and expressing the faith. It first occurred in 1972 in McClure versus the Salvation Army. This exception does not apply just to clergy. Lawsuits by music directors, parochial school principals, parochial school teachers, a communications manager, an associate in pastoral care, and others have all been barred. But the exemption currently in the Bethlehem non-discrimination ordinance goes even further and would be a radical new step backwards. By exempting anyone with a connection to a religious institution, the ordinance would be eviscerated. It would be a dead letter. The Pennsylvania Human Relations Act and the existing local non-discrimination ordinances in the Commonwealth do not have exemptions this broad. The ACLU has a rich history of defending the religious expression rights of Americans of many faiths. However, when a business person chooses to open his or her doors to the public, he or she is choosing to engage in the public marketplace. Because he has made that choice, the business must then abide by the laws created by the legislative, and in this case the executive branch, on behalf of its community. If the government decides that it is beneficial to the greater good to institute certain laws and regulations, business persons who choose to engage in public commerce have an obligation to follow the rules of the game. Religion has been used to justify discrimination throughout American history. It has been used to justify slavery, the separation of races, and opposition to interracial marriage. Certainly, during the black civil rights movements of the 1950s and 1960s, there were those who believed that religion justified segregation. But the idea of a religious exemption to the Federal Civil Rights Act as broad as that proposed here in Bethlehem is unthinkable today. Likewise, City Council would be wise to support an amendment to the non-discrimination ordinance to ensure that the religious exemption is revised. Without it, the ordinance would be toothless. Let us be clear that your vote on an amendment to revise that exemption is in reality a yes or no vote on the ordinance itself. Thank you again for the opportunity to present comment on the proposed non-discrimination ordinance. The ACLU of Pennsylvania encourages you to vote yes on a revision of the religious exemption and vote yes on the ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Mark Albright.
Mr. Mayor, members of City Council. My name is Mark Albright. I live at 533 Magnolia Road in Hellertown. There are a few moments in the course of a lifetime when we have a chance to contribute in a decisive way to improving the quality of life and liberty for our fellow citizens. This evening, the members of Council are afforded just such an opportunity in the form of the proposed anti-discrimination ordinance before you now. I appear tonight as a Northampton County attorney, as a member of the Greater Lehigh Valley chapter of the American Civil Liberties Union, and as Vice President of the Congregation of the Unitarian Universalist Church on Center Street. Just as importantly, I'm here as someone who loves and appreciates Bethlehem and all that it has to offer. Between my church and community involvements, I actually spend much more time here than anywhere else. For well over 2 centuries, this city has been a center for industry, art, music, culture, recreation, fine dining, higher education, and religious freedom. Its very roots lie in the Moravian aspiration to live lives of peace and productivity without fear of persecution, simply because of who they were and how they lived their lives. Sadly, up until this very evening, that Moravian dream has not been available to a very significant segment of the population who visit, live, or work in this city. For those who are gay, lesbian, bisexual, or transgender, living lives of peace and productivity without fear of persecution simply because of who they are is not possible within Bethlehem city limits, where they face discrimination in housing, employment, and public accommodations, all of which remains 100% legal. As we enter the second decade of the 21st century, it's time Bethlehem makes good on its promise and heritage of escape from persecution and enacts an anti-discrimination ordinance for the benefit of everyone who finds their way here. Whether folks come to Bethlehem to pursue higher education, to take on a new job, to visit Music Fest, Steel Stacks, or other recreational, historic, or cultural sites, they should certainly be able to do so without having to surrender basic rights and liberties at the city limits. Neither Bethlehem nor any of its diverse ethnic or faith communities is threatened by extending equal rights to all. No subgroup within our population is being singled out for special protection or treatment, and all will be protected. Likewise, the notion of rolling up our own sleeves and taking care of our own conflicts in human relations right here, without having to run people all the way out to Harrisburg for relief, is in everyone's best interests. As an attorney, I strongly urge council to accept the suggestions that have been made by Stephen Glassman and others familiar with ordinances of this kind throughout the Commonwealth. As important as it is to finally enact this protective legislation, it is equally important to do so in a way that is the most meaningful, using proven, widely accepted, and recognized language and filing deadlines. As an advocate for passage of an ordinance, but one that will facilitate the protection of everyone's rights in a reasonable fashion and with consistent results, I beg you to reject 3 impediments to a good ordinance. Number 1, any sunsetting of human rights protections. Number 2, complaint filing deadlines of less than 180 days. And number 3, an overly broad religious exemption that would permit ongoing discrimination in some contexts not integral to an organization's faith practices. Bethlehem is a city of diverse beliefs with much to offer and a quality of life that will continue to attract people from all over if we simply do, as 20 other Pennsylvania municipalities have already done before us, and enact the anti-discrimination ordinance which is before you. It is the right thing to do, the right time to do it, and it's the only outcome of these deliberations that's worthy of a city this outstanding. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Bitterman?
Good evening, and thank you, Bethlehem Council, for the opportunity to speak in support of the Human Relations Ordinance.
Your name and address, please.
My name is Wendy Bitterman.
Thank you.
I live on Shady Oaks Drive in Saylorsburg, Pennsylvania, but I have many ties to Bethlehem. My 2 sons live in Bethlehem. They are working this evening, but they would be here if they could to support this ordinance along with me. I worked in Bethlehem for a number of years. My partner used to live in Bethlehem. I've supported the businesses of Bethlehem over the years with a great deal of my income, shopping at Cleo's and eating at Apollo's, having good times at the Brew Works and Beer Bellies. I have golfed and I have gone to the Playhouse and I have done the Halloween walking tour and I've picnicked at Monocacy Creek. I'm a member of my church choir, and we have been the choir providing all the music at the live nativity in Bethlehem for the last 4 years. And this place, where we are this evening, is better known to me as America Plots. I love Bethlehem, and Bethlehem has so much to offer. It is a shame, then, that this good city lags behind in the embrace of equality for all individuals, for the lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender community. It is shameful. It is shameful for any town. I am a person of faith. I am very active in my church. My relationship with God informs all the areas of my life and has for many years. I serve on the board of directors at Metropolitan Community Church of the Lehigh Valley on North 4th Street in Allentown as the vice moderator. I've served in many ministries in that church over the years. My faith informs my view of this ordinance, and it is fully consistent with the view of a faith-based person that this ordinance be passed. I am fortunate to work for an employer who celebrates diversity, but many others are not so lucky. How utterly unfair that an individual could be deprived of their rights to housing and employment, based solely on their sexual orientation or gender identity. Bethlehem will follow many other cities in Pennsylvania by enacting the legislation that we're discussing tonight. City by city, state by state, the laws are changing. And it would be a real shame to see Bethlehem lag behind any further in this legislative initiative. And so I urge you, Council, to pass this legislation, and I thank you in advance for your wisdom and your leadership in doing so. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Barkhouse.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Barb Boz. I live at 1728 Woodstown Road here in Bethlehem. I support this ordinance as a citizen and as a taxpayer. I hope you pass this in a way that will protect all people. You sometimes don't realize how important human rights are unless you don't have them. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Susan Schaefer. Ms. Schaefer, before we start, would it be possible for the mayor maybe to turn the mic over? What? Yeah, go ahead.
I can.
Thank you. We'll start right from the beginning.
Susan Rubel Schaefer. I've lived at 3341 Lloyd Byron Drive in Bethlehem for most of my life. And I've always been an advocate for people with disabilities. I appreciate the opportunity to speak about disability rights and how that is such an important aspect of the Human Relations Commission. Most of us know about the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, which was passed July 26, 1990, and it was considered the most comprehensive piece of legislation since the Civil Rights Act of 1964, and it covers employment, transportation, public accommodations, communication for people with hearing impairments, and enforcement of the law. Now therein lies the problem. There's not a lot of teeth in the law, so you can threaten suits all over the place, but not many actually get passed, because unless a person is embarrassed through the media, and I've been involved in protests for different restaurants that refuse to put a little ramp on the side or in the back of a restaurant, they won't do anything. So we're often overlooked because having a disability is not consider that important. You don't see a lot of people with visual disabilities. A lot of times they're there, but they don't get recognized. And I think it's very important to have a commission like this to deal with this perspective of disability as well. I was looking over the duties: promoting and understanding, making studies, assisting organizations, conducting educational programs, and referring different groups regarding complaints. I've done work in all those areas. I have a master's degree in rehabilitation from Hofstra University, and on my own, for about 20 years, I created a little program called Infobility: inform and empower people about disability, helping people with challenges to connect to and navigate the system, because it can be real confusing, to connect them with resources and to just empower them, speaking at support groups on challenges and dealing with challenges regardless of what kind of challenge you have. I did that yesterday. And also addressing people without disabilities, helping them understand disability awareness. I've done a lot of programs in schools. I've done lots of research programs. I've done awareness programs to adults. And I think it would be really great, really important to include a very important section of disability as part of this human relations. Carl Odner, years ago, was pretty active in this field, and he founded a disability organization that we know as Lehigh Valley Center for Independent Living. That was in Allentown, and now, well, they're still in Allentown, but they've moved. But I really wanted to do some of the events that he created and just continue the legacy. And they do have events, but I really believe that they should have more people without disabilities experiencing disability. It's not the end of the world. I want them to see that the world is not over once you have a challenge. Not to evoke a sympathy or empathy, but to just understand that a disability is not a bad thing. It just is different. So I'm hoping I can add something to the commission from the disability perspective. Thank you.
Thank you. Miss Liz Bradbury.
I'm Liz Bradbury. I live at 427.5 North 9th Street in Allentown. I'm Executive Director of Pennsylvania Diversity Network, a gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender advocacy organization that's based here in the Lehigh Valley and serves Bethlehem. I'm also an Allentown Human Relations Commissioner and have served with the Commission for over 13 years, including as chair of the Commission for 3 years. As the Executive Director of Pennsylvania Diversity Network, I help gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender people who have been discriminated against. Right now, Bethlehem is one of only 4 of Pennsylvania's 15 largest cities that doesn't protect gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender people from discrimination. The only other cities within this group of 15 that do not have this law are Wilkes-Barre, Williamsport, and Altoona. In April, in the council committee meeting in which this ordinance was discussed, I told you about a number of instances in which the gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender people have been discriminated against in Bethlehem and how they had no recourse under the law. In fact, there are still groups, individuals, and organizations that seek to discriminate against gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender people as their primary mission. Just a few years ago, the Westboro Baptist Church, the organization that pickets the funerals of fallen military heroes with signs that say, "God hates fags," came to Bethlehem and picketed Lehigh University and a number of local mainstream churches. Some local anti-gay people joined in the pickets. Though the number of people who support discrimination against GLBT people continues to lessen, anti-gay letters and derogatory messages about GLBT people clearly demonstrate that there is a need for an ordinance that protects against discrimination. There is no question that the people who write such letters would discriminate against the gay community, and under current Bethlehem law, the victims of this discrimination would have no legal recourse. Yet, others take a subtler but perhaps more effective approach to discrimination. They try to weaken anti-discrimination laws by creating exemption language that seeks to nullify the actual protections. Sometimes this kind of language even happens by mistake. Yet these broad loopholes in anti-discrimination laws directly affect protections against discrimination for the gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender population. I am pleased to hear that members of council and the mayor plan to amend the language of the current proposed ordinance to reflect a religious exemption that will allow churches to function within their mission, but will close the broad loopholes that will still allow discrimination